Hello, my name is Diane Sal. Thank you for joining us today. This program is J-Bomb TV, and I thank you so much for being here. And it's going to be a wonderful program, exciting topic. I have with me a special guest. His name is Dr. William Ayles, and he is the author of Treasures in Heaven. So I'd like to introduce you to our guest today.
Thank you, Diane. It's very nice to be here.
I think this is exciting that you have self-published your own book.
Absolutely. Treasures in Heaven. This goes way back when. I can remember I've always been fascinated by the concept of eternity. Mm-hmm. I had questions. Why am I here? How do you reach out to God? What happens after I die? And fast forward to the year 2000, and I had 6 weeks of divine intervention. It was one supernatural event after another. And that was the catalyst for writing this book, which is my second book.
Oh, that's terrific. And that would be Treasures in Heaven. And I think it's exciting that you were really inspired to write this book, but also that you really took steps to be a self-publisher. And I think that's a wonderful program that is offered out there for people to publish their own books. And I say this just to encourage those out there that are thought about writing a book, that you can self-publish. So I just want to let you know that. You were inspired. When was about the first time or thought that it came to you, Treasures in Heaven, and how it evolved into putting a book together?
Well, with the intervention, I knew that I would be researching and writing, and I wanted to answer the questions I had so that anyone could know that they could have life everlasting and know it without doubt. And this concept of treasures in heaven, I was interested because I honestly never heard much about it in my Bible studies or church, and I wanted to understand the totality of this invitation what Christ gave during his Sermon on the Mount, which was store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Mm-hmm. And I'm the kind of person that has to get to the bottom of whatever the subject is. So I wanted to know what treasures in heaven are, how you store them up, and why did Christ give us this invitation in the first place. And what you realize is that this subject goes from the Sermon on the Mount all the way to the last chapter of Revelation. It ties together the hereafter with the here and now in a very tangible way. So our lives now determine our eternity. Not only eternal life, but treasures that you are granted and bestowed in the next life, which you have forever, and right now determines that type of treasure. So it's getting the word out that what we do matters for eternity. Yes. And life is like a live play, and our script is the scriptures. And the more you know about the script, the better equipped you are to have a firm foundation in the next life.
So with this deep desire to focus in on this topic, you did a great length of research on it.
Yes. Well, this book is the culmination of 35 plus years of research. Wow. Not only my own, but I've studied many theologians as well from different denominations. And my interest is understanding the scriptures basically from the inside out. Mm-hmm. What did Christ say and what did the apostles say about the subject?
Mm-hmm. And when was it that you had, with all the research and understanding, about what time frame did that start for you? Because you were, I want to really dig deep into this topic. About when did you start?
The topic of Treasures in Heaven started back in 2010. That's when this subject began to gel as the centerpiece of the research that I had conducted, that this subject ties together this life and the next life. It ties together this life with the rapture, with the new heaven and new earth. It is the thread that binds the entire New Testament and makes this life and the next life, the connection, tangible, unmistakable, and inspirational.
Which is really great. So, what was your revelation did you get a revelation? Did you get a really an experience to do the research and then ultimately put it into a book? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, tell me a little bit about you. That kind of, because this is an extension of you.
Right, right. Well, you know, this goes back to 1980 when I was a senior at UConn. And I was going to be graduating, and I realized that I was going to be graduating with a lot of unanswered questions. And I had to get answers. And the questions I spoke of earlier, in addition, what is my purpose in life? And I knew that truth had to be in the New Testament, of course, founded upon the Old Testament. And I wanted to understand answers to these questions. And when you begin to see this book unfold, it becomes a life source. It becomes your very breath. It's the word says of itself that it's living energy. So it takes on this life in your own being, and it snowballs into something of a spiritual adventure. And in the year 2000, unbeknownst to me, God had other plans for me. I had 6 weeks of one supernatural event after another, making it unmistakable that the supernatural is just as real as the natural. And in my case, I had known that, but not to that degree, where, you know, this creator could just intervene in your life out of nowhere and inspire you to do what you long to do, you know, deep within. And he opened doors for me that I never thought would be open. So from that point, I began this, you know, project of researching and writing. And as far as the self-publishing goes, I belong to the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association, an amazing group, talented,
Wonderful, yes.
well-connected, and their ability to edit, to publish, takes, you know, what your raw work is and turns it into this. And it becomes a very straightforward process. And as you mentioned, anyone who's inspired to write, whether it be poetry, biography, fictional, non-fictional, you can take your word processor and with the help of those who have this knowledge, turn it into a book. And it's exciting to have that, like you said, an extension of yourself in paperback.
It is, because there was so much passion behind in writing, in your research, a lot of research and writing, and then to ultimately be turned into a book and in self-publishing. So it is an extension of who you are and in your efforts. I know you had stated the message that you wanted to get across to the public, of those that may read the book. What are some other points that you'd like to also see people come out with that, or what kind of feedback have you received from those that have read the book?
Sure. As far as other points in the book, the primary focus of the book is, as we discussed, but the end of the book is designed for atheists, agnostics, and believers. It is a blend of recent scientific evidence, astronomical, biochemical, archaeological, and the biblical narrative of creation from the Old and New Testaments. And what it shows is that recent scientific evidence is actually in alignment with the biblical narrative. And I contrast scientific evidence from across different disciplines with theory, Big Bang, evolution, creation, so the reader can understand what these theories say and understand what the evidence is saying. I mean, the theory of evolution is 150 years old, and scientific evidence that's less than 10, 20 years old is speaking a different story.
Yes.
And that's what I think anyone who has an interest in the subject deserves to understand, that there's more to the story than what we're being told. Scientific evidence doesn't make it into the mainstream media. It's there in scientific journals. I wanted to make that accessible and put it in the context of creation, so those who do subscribe to science, and I have plenty of friends, associates that do, my suggestion to them is subscribe to evidence, not just old theory.
Yes, that's excellent. I think that's excellent that you did that. So this book can speak to a broader audience
Correct.
of people. I have read the book and I looked through it, and for myself, I think it's a wonderful a tool for a Bible study, group setting, to learn further of it. But it's refreshing to see that you have included science, that you have included other theories in it as well, to really answer questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I personally wanted to understand this earth going back in time. You know, the story of the creation of Adam and Eve, which basically goes back to 4000 BC, but then you have the fossils that go back millions of years. And incredibly enough, that's explained in the Bible, in particular the Apostle Peter, who spoke of 3 heavens and 3 earths in his revelation, and we are now in the 2nd heaven and earth. We have yet a new heaven and earth yet to be created, Revelation 21 and 22, and in the 1st heaven and earth you find all those fossils that predate modern man. It's an amazing narrative. And
I was looking at the back of the book, and there's another book you have also published.
Yes, my first book was called The Prophecy, and it focused on the present salvation through Christ and the future salvation, which is, of course, known as the rapture. And that book I worked on when I was working on my doctorate. And this book uses the prophecy as a baseline and goes well beyond it, incorporating the concept of treasures in heaven and many other prophecies that were not in the prophecy. So this is meant to be...
Oh, really? So you really were able to elaborate further from your previous book into this one.
Yes.
So you feel that this one is more full, well-rounded, or just
Absolutely.
encompasses more information for the reader?
Right. Your mind never stops when you're researching. It's just, this keeps percolating, and it's like a big crossword puzzle, and the pieces come together the more you see that, and it becomes fascinating. So when I'm submerged behind the computer and I have a research book or two in the Bible, and I got my keyboard going at Mach 1, I'm in my element. So whether this is what inspires you, theology or an autobiography, when you immerse yourself behind the computer, it is a fascinating way to effectively use your time. People would ask me, what do you enjoy doing for fun? And I would say, writing. And that would really be it, because the fulfillment you receive, anyone can receive, is indescribable. To be able to produce something on a blank piece of paper, so to speak, and add text to it.
And it took you quite a few years to put this together because of the length of research that you did. And you said it was compiled of how many theses or research papers?
Well, this book represents over 35 years of research, but the book itself took me 5 years part-time to write, start to finish. And along the way, I had an amazing group of people giving me feedback. I wanted it to be a collaborative effort, and it certainly was, and they're in my acknowledgments. So it made for a fascinating journey, a very enjoyable one. Of course, it's enjoyable to have it done, but during the process, it was truly fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, do you feel? I know this was an incredible accomplishment, and you're very busy after just self-publishing the book. Have you had any thoughts or ideas on another book, a third one?
Well, as far as another book, the answer would be yes. In fact, I'm developing a concept right now. It's an article, but it can easily blossom into a book. It's more research oriented on how all these pieces of the puzzle within the Bible come together and fit. And you realize that this had to be done by an author that's supernatural when you really understand this from Genesis to Revelation. So this would be more about how the puzzle fits together, a real nuts and bolts of the Bible, the way it comes together over time. It's an unfolding revelation. At the moment, I'm planning to simply get the word out. I'll be meeting with people that I know in this state and other states and teaching in different Bible studies.
That's exciting. I have one very important question. I know with all the research and the passion that you had in writing Treasures in Heaven, how has it impacted your own life? How has it changed your own walk or your own decision making?
There's no question that the peace that I have on the inside is so much deeper today than it was when I started the book. The Bible says of itself, grace and peace be multiplied through the knowledge of God. So through the knowledge of God, grace and peace is multiplied, and you realize it's not just words on a piece of paper. It becomes your personal reality, and with that peace comes an amazing increase in patience and a greater sensitivity to looking to do simple things to benefit and bless others. I think it probably increased my awareness of what's around me much more so than when I began writing the book, because it becomes part of what you are and how you think. Storing up treasures in heaven, and as I say in the book, if you step out the door and see treasures in heaven, you know that you have accepted his invitation, because he gave us his invitation to change what we see. And I definitely see the connection between the hereafter and the here and now like never before in my everyday thoughts, words, and actions. And I feel better about myself at the end of the day. Just because I think what Christ said in a much more profound way.
I think that's incredible that you were so powerfully impacted as well through that time of researching and digging in to learn, that it did come into fruition with not only publishing Treasures in Heaven, which I just wanted to show everyone, the book again, but how you've been able to apply it to your life and how it changed your views, seeing life through our eyes or seeing life through God's eyes. Can you give some examples about how that changed, how you saw things through your own human eyes and now see things through God's eyes?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have a greater sense of the fact that you really are a spiritual being on this material earth. You have a greater sense of awareness that you have this flesh and blood, but at the same time, you do have this Holy Spirit that occupies every cell of your body. And that Spirit definitely works with your mind and your heart as you pray, as you think, as you read. So it's engaging what's within you to a greater degree so you think differently. If you find yourself getting caught up in the everyday busyness of life, which can easily happen, your perspective can slip into a material realm, and you can think things that maybe are counter to the scriptures. But if you allow this to become part of who you are through the research, that changes your perception. And then again, your awareness of what's around you changes. And the reality is, it's the unconditional love that ramps up in your life. You really move away from conditional love and move into unconditional love just almost unconsciously. And that becomes part of who you are. And that changes everything.
That's wonderful. I think that's beautiful what you did, and how it's impacted your own life, and all the research that you did now will bless so many others to be able to dive really deep into this teaching. Like I said, I think it's a wonderful, again, Treasures in Heaven book that could be utilized even within a Bible study group. Very, very handy. And so
I'll mention that the book is available without charge. I have the entire book published on my website because I do believe in freely you have received, freely give. So anyone can read this book without charge on my website, which is thetimeline.org. It also is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online if you wanted to have a paperback. So either way, it's available online. I do meet with people, and I'm glad to sign copies and share the summary of the book. And so in any event, thetimeline.org, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, that's where you can find it.
That's wonderful. And I think what's also exciting is that Dr. William Ayles will also be coming again on our program, JBON TV, to do a full lecture on the book, Treasures in Heaven. So I think that's really exciting that you're going to come on the show and do that.
I very much look forward to that.
Yes, yes. And I noticed Dr. William Ayles. What's the doctor stand for?
It's DD, which is Doctor of Divinity. And I have a master's from UConn, an MBA, and a bachelor's from UConn.
Terrific. Terrific.
The cover of the book, this is from the Hubble Space Telescope, and the title of the photo is A String of Cosmic Pearls, and I couldn't find a better photo in the entire Hubble Space Telescope gallery to represent Treasures in Heaven. And on the back, this is the scattered light of the Boomerang Nebula, which shows the variation of the light within God.
Yes. And it was just very, I think, with all the research done and all the writing that you did, and really made it available for a broader spectrum of groups of people that might inquire about the book. You did make it quite a doable size to read. You know, it's not like a 12-volume series. So I think that was very useful, and I appreciate that you had done that.
Diane, thank you so much for allowing me to have this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Bill, and you're very welcome. It was so wonderful to have you here today, and I'm glad you joined us. Thank you so much for everyone who have joined us here today. And I just, again, the topic today was about Treasures in Heaven with author and Dr. William Ayles. I just encourage you to visit www.thetimeline.org. And this program is JBOM TV, affiliated with Jesus No Walls Ministry. And if you'd like to see this program again, it is aired on Nutmeg TV. They will air it on their website, and it'll be wonderful. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.